Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving deep into a topic that's, well, pretty universal: human sexuality, but also surprisingly complex. We'll be exploring Jared Diamond's book, Why is Sex Fun? And let me tell you, it's a real eye opener, so get ready to have some of your assumptions challenged.
What I find so fascinating is that we often take human sexuality for granted, like it's the norm in nature. But when you actually compare our behavior to other mammals, it becomes clear that humans are really the outliers.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these outlier behaviors. What makes us so different?
Well, for most mammals, you see, sex is a very straightforward affair,
Hmm.
primarily about reproduction, minimal emotional investment, no real pair bonding to speak of. They mate when the female is in heat, and that's pretty much it. You won't find a lot of long-term relationships or complex family units in the animal kingdom.
That is so different from how we humans experience sex. We form these long-term partnerships, sometimes for life. We have sex for pleasure, and we experience menopause, which seems kind of counterintuitive from an evolutionary standpoint.
Exactly. And let's not forget the significant role the human males play in caring for their offspring. Paternal care is incredibly rare in the mammal world, yet it's like a defining feature of human societies.
So what led to these unique aspects of human sexuality? Diamond introduces this concept of the battle of the sexes to kind of explain some of these differences. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. The battle of the sexes really arises from the different levels of investment that males and females make in their offspring, particularly in species with internal fertilization. Females, because they carry and nurture the fetus, they make a much larger initial investment. And this creates a sort of evolutionary conflict of interest.
I see. I'm starting to see where this is going. So males, evolutionarily speaking, they're driven to spread their genes as widely as possible, right?
Yeah.
While females, they're more selective, looking for partners who are going to contribute to the survival of their offspring.
That's the basic idea. And it plays out in fascinating ways across different species. Like we see a complete reversal of typical sex roles in some shorebirds. The spotted sandpiper, for instance. The males are the primary caregivers. They incubate the eggs, raise the chicks, while the females compete for access to males and their resources.
Wow, that's a real role reversal. It makes you wonder if paternal care is so crucial in humans, why haven't men evolved to share the burden of breastfeeding?
That's a really provocative question, and one that Diamond tackles in his book. Physiologically, male lactation, it isn't totally out of the question. We see examples of hormonally induced milk production in other animals. Even newborn human babies, both male and female, they sometimes produce witch's milk. And believe it or not, there's a species of fruit bat where the males regularly lactate and share in the feeding of their young.
Okay, that's wild. So, if it's physically possible, why haven't human males evolved to breastfeed? What's the evolutionary advantage there?
Well, remember, evolution, it favors traits that provide a reproductive advantage in a given environment.
Right.
And for millions of years, mammalian evolution, it's favored a system where females are the primary caregivers, at least in those early stages, because of their initial investment in pregnancy and childbirth. But things are changing rapidly. Diamond actually suggests that with technologies like in vitro fertilization, male lactation, it could become more evolutionarily plausible in the future.
Whoa. Imagine a future where dads are sharing breastfeeding duties. That's that's a really thought-provoking idea. Now, let's move on to another intriguing aspect of human sexuality: concealed ovulation. Unlike a lot of mammals, human females don't give these obvious signs of when they're ovulating. Why would that be?
That's a question that has puzzled scientists for quite a long time. Diamond presents two main theories to explain this. The daddy at home theory suggests that concealed ovulation, it promotes monogamy. If a man doesn't know when his partner is fertile, he's more likely to stick around and mate frequently to increase his chances of fathering a child. This theory, therefore, it kind of implies that concealed ovulation is a strategy to encourage male investment in both the relationship and the offspring.
That makes sense. It's like a built-in mechanism to encourage long-term pair bonding. What about the other theory?
The other one is called the many fathers theory. And this one proposes that concealed ovulation is a strategy for females to confuse paternity and potentially reduce the risk of infanticide. If a male isn't certain that he's the father, he's less likely to harm an infant that might carry his genes. This theory has a slightly darker implication, suggesting that concealed ovulation is a tactic to protect offspring from potentially aggressive males.
Both theories offer really different interpretations of the same phenomenon. It makes you realize how complex and multifaceted human behavior can be. Does Diamond favor one theory over the other?
Well, he presents a study on primates that found no clear link between concealed ovulation and monogamy, which kind of challenges the daddy-at-home theory. So the mystery continues.
Okay, so the jury's still out on that one. But this discussion of concealed ovulation and its potential implications, it brings up a broader question. What about the role of men in human evolution beyond simply, well, procreation?
Ah, that's the million-dollar question. Diamond explores this in detail using some fascinating research on the H people of Paraguay. They're a hunter-gatherer society. And the H men are known for their hunting skills, but what's interesting is that they prefer to hunt big game, even though it's less efficient for providing food than hunting smaller animals.
That seems kind of counterintuitive. Why would they choose a less productive hunting strategy?
Well, that's where the show-off theory comes in. Diamond argues that big game hunting, while not the most practical way to put food on the table, is a fantastic way for males to gain status and attention. And that, in turn, can lead to more mating opportunities.
So instead of just focusing on providing for their families, they're also trying to impress potential mates with their skills and bravery, like a prehistoric version of flexing your biceps at the gym or something.
Exactly. And the study, it actually found that successful big game hunters did indeed have more extra pair copulations, meaning they were fathering children with women other than their primary partners. These findings highlight the conflict interplay between biology, behavior, and culture in shaping human sexuality.
It's fascinating to see how even in a traditional society like the Ack, the battle of the sexes is playing out in these subtle ways. And I guess it's important to note that not all men fit this pattern. Human behavior is incredibly diverse, and there's a wide range of mating and parenting strategies across cultures.
Absolutely. Generalizations can be dangerous, especially when we're dealing with something as complex as human behavior. But the show-off theory, it does raise some intriguing questions about the motivations behind, seemingly altruistic actions.
Indeed. Speaking of seemingly counterintuitive behaviors, let's dive into another evolutionary puzzle. Menopause.
Mhm.
Why would human females just shut down reproduction midlife when they could, theoretically, have more children? Doesn't that contradict the whole drive to pass on one's genes?
It's a real paradox,
Yeah.
and one that sets humans apart from most other animals. Menopause is incredibly rare in the animal kingdom. Most animals continue to reproduce until they die. So there must be something unique about human evolution that led to this phenomenon.
Diamond offers a really fascinating explanation called the grandmother hypothesis. Can you tell us more about that?
The grandmother hypothesis suggests that older women, even though they can't have children themselves anymore, they contribute to their genetic legacy in a different way by helping to raise their grandchildren and supporting their existing offspring.
That makes sense, especially considering how long it takes human children to become independent. Having like an extra set of hands to help with childcare, gather food, and share knowledge, that would be a huge advantage.
Precisely. And in pre-literate societies, older individuals, they're like walking libraries. They preserve essential knowledge and traditions that are crucial for survival. Diamond even shares a compelling story from his own fieldwork about an elderly woman on Rennell Island who possessed crucial information about famine foods after a devastating cyclone.
Wow, that's an incredible example of the vital role that older individuals play in traditional societies. They're not just passively aging, they're actively contributing to the survival and success of their families and communities. This grandmother hypothesis, it really reframes how we view aging and the contributions of older women in human evolution.
Yeah. It also raises some interesting questions about the role of older men, though. If the grandmother hypothesis holds true, should there be a corresponding, like, grandfather hypothesis? What what unique contributions do older men make to ensure the success of their descendants?
That's a great point. It seems like there's still a lot we don't know about the evolution of aging and the complex interplay of male and female roles in human societies. But for now, let's shift gears and explore a lighter but equally fascinating topic. Body signals.
Okay, I'm game. What kind of body signals? Stoke
Okay.
signals, bat signals.
Not quite. We're going to delve into the subtle and often unconscious ways that we use our bodies to communicate information to others. This includes, body language and physical features like muscle mass, facial symmetry, and even body fat distribution.
Ah, so you could say that our bodies are essentially billboards advertising our evolutionary fitness.
Fascinating. And just like in the animal world, these signals, they've evolved over time to be reliable indicators of certain qualities. So what kinds of messages are our bodies sending?
Well, one of the most obvious is reproductive maturity, of course. Think about the changes that happen during puberty,
Yeah.
the development of breasts in females, facial hair in males, changes in body shape and voice. These are all like clear signals that an individual is ready to reproduce. But there's much more to it than just signaling, sexual maturity. We're
Yeah.
constantly making judgments about others based on their appearance, even if we don't realize it.
So when I walk into a room and immediately feel drawn to a certain person, that could be my subconscious reading their body signals
Right.
and making judgments about, I don't know, their health, their fertility, or even their genetic quality.
It's certainly possible. We are evolutionarily programmed to respond to certain cues that signal those very qualities. Diamond discusses this concept of truth in advertising when it comes to body signals,
Yeah.
which suggests that certain physical traits are, they're costly to develop and maintain, and therefore they serve as honest indicators of an individual's, underlying quality.
Ah, I see. So it's like a peacock's tail. It's big and flashy and a real pain to lug around, but it signals to potential mates that the male is strong and healthy enough to survive despite this elaborate handicap.
Exactly. And humans, we have similar truth in advertising signals. For instance, men's muscles. They're more than just aesthetically pleasing. They signal strength, dominance, and the ability to protect, which can be attractive to potential mates and also deter potential rivals.
So those guys at the gym, grunting and sweating while pumping iron, they're not just trying to impress the ladies, they're also sending a message to other men about their physical prowess and dominance.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the same can be said for facial symmetry. We tend to find symmetrical, well-proportioned faces more attractive. And there's evidence that this preference is linked to good genes and overall health.
Interesting. So our attraction to symmetrical faces, it isn't just a cultural construct. There's an evolutionary basis for it.
That seems to be the case.
Yeah.
Of course, beauty is somewhat subjective, and it can vary across cultures, but certain universal features, they do appeal to us. And those features, they often signal good health and reproductive potential.
This makes me think about how we present ourselves to others, especially in the age of online dating. Maybe we're all more conscious of these signals than we realize.
Perhaps. But before you revamp your entire dating profile, let's talk about another fascinating example of truth in advertising women's body fat.
Okay, this should be interesting.
Now, I know this is a sensitive topic, and cultural norms, they play a huge role in how we view body shape. But from an evolutionary perspective, fat deposits in certain areas of a woman's body, they can serve as honest signals of fertility and health. For example, breast fat. It's energetically costly to produce and maintain. And it signals to potential mates that a woman is well-nourished and capable of providing for offspring. So those curves, they're more than just aesthetically pleasing. They're actually conveying important information about reproductive potential and overall health. Exactly. There's even speculation that fat deposition in a woman's hips, it might signal a wide birth canal, which would be beneficial for childbirth. Yeah. These truth in advertising signals, they help us understand why certain physical features have evolved to be considered attractive. Though it's important to remember that these are generalizations, and there's a lot of variation within the human population.
This whole concept of truth in advertising is making me see the human body in a whole new light. We're talking billboards advertising our evolutionary fitness.
Speaking of billboards, there's one very prominent and perhaps controversial example we haven't discussed yet, the human penis.
Ooh. Now you're really getting into deep dive territory.
The question is it possible that this seemingly obvious reproductive tool also serves a signaling function? What could it be advertising? And to whom?
Well, I guess we'll have to save that juicy topic for part 2 of our deep dive. Stay tuned, folks, because things are about to get even more interesting.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we're about to get into a rather, well, delicate topic, the potential signaling function of the human penis.
Yes, let's get into it. It's a body part that's, captivated artists and poets and pretty much everyone for centuries. But from an evolutionary perspective, is there more to it than meets the eye?
Diamond certainly thinks so. He starts by comparing the human penis to those of our closest relatives, the great apes.
And how do we measure up?
Well, let's just say we're rather well endowed, the human penis is significantly larger than those of gorillas or orangutans.
Okay, but size isn't everything, right? There
Yeah.
must be a functional reason for the difference.
That's where things get interesting. Diamond, he argues that the size of the human penis, it seems to exceed what's strictly necessary for reproduction. For example, a chimpanzee penis, though smaller than ours, is still perfectly capable of delivering sperm and achieving fertilization.
So if it's not purely about function, what else could be going on?
Diamond points to a fascinating cultural example, the phallocarps worn by men in the highlands of New Guinea.
Those elaborate sheaths they wear over their equipment.
Exactly. These phallocarps can be quite extravagant. Long, brightly colored, often decorated with fur or feathers. And what's interesting is that men wear them constantly, choosing like different models to suit their
Because
moods.
it's like a fashion statement. But what does it have to do with the evolution of the penis?
Diamond suggests that the phallocarp, it represents a kind of idealized penis,
Hmm.
a symbol of masculinity and virility that's not constrained by the practical limitations of biology.
I see. So the human penis, while not as extreme as a phallocarp, might still be larger than strictly necessary for reproduction because it's also sending a signal. But who is the intended audience?
That's the million-dollar question. Most men would probably assume that the signal is aimed at women, but research suggests that women aren't necessarily more attracted to larger penises.
So if not women, who are men trying to impress each
Mhm.
other?
It's a possibility. Think about, those classic locker room scenes where men are often sizing each other up. There's definitely a sense of competition and comparison going on.
Okay, so maybe it's a bit of both. Men might be signaling their virility to both potential mates and potential rivals.
Exactly. And this brings us back to those competing theories of sexual selection we discussed earlier. Fisher's runaway selection model. It suggests that the penis might have become larger over time simply because females developed a preference for it, even if that preference wasn't directly tied to reproductive success.
So a bit like a fashion trend that got out of control.
In a way, yes. But Zahavi's handicap principle offers a different perspective. It argues that a large penis might be a handicap, a costly signal that only the most fit males can afford to develop.
Because it takes a lot of energy and resources to grow and maintain.
Precisely. And by sporting this potentially cumbersome appendage, males are signaling their superior genes and overall health.
I'm starting to think that the human penis is more complicated than I ever imagined.
Yeah, and we haven't even touched on the psychological and cultural factors that shape our perceptions of it. But I think it's safe to say that the evolution of the human penis, like so much of human sexuality, is a complex and fascinating puzzle.
Well said. It seems like every time we answer one question, we uncover a dozen more.
That's the beauty of science and of human evolution in particular. There's always more to learn,
Yeah.
and our understanding is constantly evolving. But speaking of evolution, let's circle back to another topic we touched on earlier: the role of older individuals in human societies.
Yes. The grandmother hypothesis was a real eye-opener. It makes so much sense that older women would contribute to their genetic legacy by helping to raise their grandchildren and support their existing offspring. But what about older men? Do they have an equivalent role?
That's a great question, and one that anthropologists are still debating. There's no clear-cut grandfather hypothesis, but there's certainly evidence that older men play important roles in many societies.
Like what?
Well, in traditional hunter-gatherer societies, older men often have like a wealth of knowledge about hunting, tracking, and the natural world. They're also often respected leaders and decision makers within their communities.
So even though they might not be as physically active as younger men, they're still contributing valuable skills and experience to the group.
Exactly, and in societies where knowledge is passed down orally, older individuals, they serve as living libraries,
Yeah.
preserving the history and traditions of their people.
I'm starting to see a pattern here. It seems like human evolution has favored a long lifespan and a complex social structure where individuals of all ages can contribute in meaningful ways.
That's a very astute observation.
Hmm.
And it challenges the traditional view of evolution as a purely individualistic competition for survival and reproduction. Humans are incredibly social creatures, And our success as a species has depended on our ability to cooperate and support each other across generations.
This is making me rethink my entire understanding of human nature.
I hope so. That's the power of taking a deep dive into these complex topics. It can
Hmm.
challenge our assumptions and broaden our perspective.
Well said. And I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the fascinating and often paradoxical nature of human sexuality, from the battle of the sexes to the mysteries of concealed ovulation and menopause. We've even pondered the potential signaling function of the human penis.
And we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah.
There's so much more to discover about the evolution of human sexuality and the complex interplay of biology, behavior, and culture that shapes our desires and relationships.
Well, on that note, let's move on to part 3 of our deep dive, where we'll continue exploring truth in advertising, but this time we'll focus on behavioral signals. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring, gosh, some really interesting ideas from Jared Diamond's book, Why is Sex Fun? Uncovering this complex web of evolutionary forces that have shaped human sexuality. And in this final part, I'm curious to kind of continue our discussion about truth in advertising. We talked about how, physical traits can act as signals, but what about behavior? Are there actions that function in the same way? Perhaps behaviors that might seem counterintuitive on the surface, but actually signal some underlying desirable quality.
Oh, absolutely. Behavioral signals, they can be just as powerful as physical attributes, if not more so. They can be a way of showcasing qualities that might not be immediately apparent, like generosity, intelligence, or even a sense of humor.
Hmm, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what kind of behaviors might fall into this truth in advertising category? Well, think about extravagant displays of generosity. Things like, donating a large sum of money to a charity or throwing a lavish party. On the surface, these actions might seem, I don't know, wasteful, even counterproductive from a purely resource management perspective.
Right. It's like saying, look how much I can afford to give away. I must have resources to spare.
Precisely. These actions signal wealth and status, which can be, highly attractive to potential mates. They convey this message that you're not just surviving, you're thriving. And there's an element of risk involved too, If you're not genuinely wealthy, these displays could backfire spectacularly.
Right. You can't fake true generosity. So in a way, these extravagant acts, they serve as a reliable indicator of someone's social standing and economic security.
Exactly. And this principle of truth in advertising, it can be applied to other behaviors as well. Think about acts of bravery or physical risk taking. These actions, while potentially dangerous, they can signal courage, strength, and the ability to protect oneself and others.
So things like skydiving, mountain climbing, or even standing up to a bully, those could fall into this category.
Absolutely. These behaviors, especially in a social context, they demonstrate that you're not easily intimidated. You're willing to face challenges head on, which can be, again, attractive to potential mates and also act as a deterrent to potential rivals.
Yeah, it's like saying I'm not afraid of a little danger. I'm a worthy mate and a formidable opponent.
Precisely. And just like with extravagant displays of generosity, there's an element of risk involved. If you're not genuinely brave or skilled, these actions could result in injury or even worse.
Right. You can't fake true courage. It's about demonstrating a genuine ability to handle, risky situations.
Exactly. And the effectiveness of these behavioral signals, it depends heavily on the context.
Yeah.
What might be considered, attractive or impressive in one culture or social group might be seen as foolish or reckless in another.
That's a great point. It seems like truth in advertising, whether through physical traits or behavior, it's all about sending a clear message about your fitness and desirability within a specific social context.
It's a great way to put it, and it highlights the fact that human behavior is incredibly nuanced and complex. We're constantly sending and receiving signals, often without even realizing it.
Gosh, this has been a fascinating exploration of truth in advertising. It's really made me think about how we present ourselves to the world and the subtle ways that evolution has shaped our behaviors.
Well, it's been a pleasure diving deep into these ideas with you. And remember, folks, why is sex fun? It's full of even more fascinating insights into the evolution of human sexuality.
So if you're curious to learn more, I highly recommend checking out Jared Diamond's book. It's a real page turner. And until next time, keep those brains buzzing and those curiosity fires burning.